So we'll start today's discussion on data definition language. Um, Data definition language, as such, is used to create, modify, or either delete the complete table as such. It mainly deals with the description or the schema of the table. And you have something called as DML, which can be which is a data manipulation language, where we try to insert the values onto the data what you have the table what you have defined, or you try to modify the content, or else you try to select, retrieve, and you use it for various other purposes. And that is where you have the data manipulation language. There are few other commands which helps us to share our data with the other people, or with your neighbors, or with your peer groups, which you call it as data control language. And the last one is transaction control language, where you allow your peer group to have an concurrent access and pertaining to the definition what we have defined. So create is a keyword, table is a keyword, and any table name which you feel like can be given. But in throughout the lab, we would recommend you to give the table name underscore the student register number, so that you will be able to access it easily. And along with that, if there are five attributes, what can be the attributes? For example, if there is a student detail as a table, your register number, your name can be attributes, which you call it as a column name. So every column name has to be defined along with the data type and the column size, if it's necessary. So there are various data types which are allowed in SQL. The first one is varchar2, which allows an variable length character data. It allows the alphanumeric values, and you can also specify the size. If I say varchar2 of 30, for instance, it can accommodate that 30 characters. And we also have a fixed length character array, where you allow only the characters and you define a size for it. Number is another data type which we commonly use, where you allow certain decimal points along with it. And to accommodate date, you use have a date data type. For integers, we use int data type. Here you have long for long variable length data. And throughout, we'll be most probably using all these data types, but still you have glob, raw, long raw, and blob and b file, or certain data types which helps us to work with the character data as well as the binary data. Now, having said you have created a table, we can also alter the structure of the table. How do I alter the structure of the table? If I need to add a new column to it, the date in which you have enrolled, maybe you have to add it and you thought it a little later. So I'll be able to alter the structure of the data just to add a new column. Now, what if I need to drop in column? That is also allowed. Modifying the existing column comes in different ways. Number one, if I have to change the data type. For instance, student name, you have given it as varchar2, and you feel that it has to be changed to character, you can always do so. How will I do it? I am supposed to alter the existing table columns data type. You can also increase or decrease the size of the data type which wherever you specify the size. So you can modify an existing column. You always work with the data type content. And then there is also an option of defining a default value for any new column what you add, which means if at all I have assigned a value to be salary, and the minimum salary is set to something around 50,000, So what happens if I don't enter the salary? It takes the minimum salary of 50,000 and it has been entered. Provided if a person has been placed at a higher salary package, then those salary packages has to be entered. So that is how you define a default value for a new column. We'll take up the syntax one by one. You have alter table, table name, whichever you feel like. Now this alter table, which is in caps, is in keyword, and then you have the table name. You're supposed to add a new column, so you are giving add with column name, data type, and any expressions which you have. The default value if needed has to be added. Now, if I have to modify the data type, you use the keyword modify. Alter table remains the same. If I have to add a column, you use the keyword add. If I have to modify the data type or modify the size of the column, then I have to go ahead with modify. Else, if I have to drop it, go ahead with alter table drop. These are few examples where you do it. When I add a column, here you have a new job ID which is added on to the table department 80. Now, what can be the output when I execute it? I am adding something called as job ID. If you see, job ID is a new column which is attached. So what happens here is alter table, table name, department 80 was the table name, where you add a new column job ID with varchar 2 of 9, which means the data type is of varchar 2. It can hold a maximum of 9 characters. On execution, you will have table altered as the answer and then modifying it. Now, last column, last name. If you just move on, you have something called as last name over here. Uh, and this last name might have something around 25 characters. So, what we have done is we have increased the size by saying modify table name varchar and it is 30. Now, where does it affect? The change affects to the subsequent insertions, any insertions which comes further on. Now you can always drop in column, and for all these we can only say you have a table altered option. Now you have just gone ahead with creation of a table, altering a table. How do I describe a table? In that case, what we'll do is we have a sentence called sorry, and statement called as DESC. One sec. Okay, you will have an description called as DESC. DESC stands for describe. So if I say describe DEPT 80, it gives you it on execution of describe DEPT 80 list all the column name as well as its data type. That is how you see the schema of a table. Fine. So we have talked about dropping a table. We have sorry, we'll go for changing the name of an object. Now what do I do? You already have a table with a particular name. You are supposed to rename it or change it to a different name, so you have the rename command. Rename with the old table name to the new table name. So the old table name, if it's department, we are converting it to the new table name, which is detail of the department. Now you also have truncating a table. What do I mean by truncating a table? Truncating a table removes all the rows what you have inserted, and it also frees off the space. Uh, but we can also use a delete statement to delete every of the insertion from that particular table. You also have a drop table command. What happens in a drop table? All the data as well as the structure of the table, which means the data description what you have given, that is the column name along with the data type and whatever it is, everything will be deleted. So before deleting it, if any pending transactions were there, based on connecting with this table, all those transactions will be saved. That is what they call it as commit. Indexes will be dropped. Indexes means you create certain index to reference to these particular tables. We'll do it later on in the course. Those things will be dropped, and you completely delete the table along with its structure. So you cannot roll back. Rolling back means you have to, if I want to find the description of the table, you cannot do it. You are deleting the complete data which is stored within the table along with its structure, but that is not so in your truncate. Truncate, you delete all the rows from the table, and if I have 10 rows which are allowed, which where you have inserted values in a table, the space which are acquired for storing those 10 rows will be freed for others to use it. So that is what truncate means. And there are certain constraints which you have to understand. What is a not null constraint? Not null constraint is where the column should not be left with a null value. Suppose you have a first name and a last name. I'll always use a not null constraint because you cannot go ahead without inserting some name onto that particular column. And therefore, you call it as a not null constraint. Whereas if you take a register number, every student is assigned with a register number. A student cannot be left out with a register number, and therefore you can use a not null constraint. The other way around is every of the register number has to be unique, which has to be distinct. And so we have the distinct or the unique constraint. Now, what is the difference between these two? Not null doesn't allow any null values, but it doesn't bother about the distinct values what are being stored. I can give a register. If I say register number to be not null, every student will have a register number, and the first student can have URK21CS1001. The second student can also have URK21CS1001. There is no distinct value constraint forced onto it. Whereas when it comes to unique, every entry has to be distinct. Now, for example, you have a register number assigned with you that is unique. Every student has his or her own Aadhaar card number, which is again unique. Uh, Now, when I create a student table, among the register number and the register number is unique,